Palmiter Bajorek, and this is my presentation from Voice AI to Integrated Builds for All. So let's get to know each other. I primarily am a linguist and a researcher. When I'm talking about linguistics, I'm talking about natural language processing, natural language understanding, automatic speech recognition, and I'm specifically a voice technologist. My previous research, which I'll talk about more, is working with multimodal user experiences. I've been a principal investigator at the University of Arizona and a senior conversational experience designer at Nuance. So I've worked at Nuance. I'm based in Seattle, Washington. Greetings from Seattle. My PhD was from the University of Arizona. I have many research publications specifically featured in Adobe XD, Ideas, Cambridge University Press, and Harvard Business Review. I'm one of the top 11 influencers in voice technology as of 2019's awards. I spoke at CES this year, which was very exciting. I've also been at every voice summit, as you can see here in the middle, with Women in Voice, and I'm also an Alexa champion. All this to say, I really care and I'm deeply involved with the voice ecosystem, and I'm really excited to speak with you today about the future of voice technology. So let's continue. To give a little bit more background about my research and my approach to thinking about this larger ecosystem, my research evolution from probably 2016 to 2020 has been really thinking about voice technology, big data, multimodal, and multilingual systems. So I've previously done research on Twitter corpora and thinking about big data and what we see in natural language data. I've looked at Cambridge University Press, my article about pronunciation and looking at different features, which we'll talk about a bit today as well. I've previously looked at ed tech products like Rosetta Stone, Babbel, Duolingo, Mango Languages, and how that reflects on different new VR ed tech tools. I've definitely also been working on voice SEO and the future of search engine optimization, user experience, and also on voice recognition and biases. The Harvard Business Review article. So I think really thinking about how all these topics interact, these are not mutually exclusive systems, but all the different types of way we think about data on the front end and the back end and the data set we're considering all are part of the same ecosystem and the future of data and technology. So as I mentioned briefly, I am the CEO and founder of Women in Voice. I'm very excited, an international nonprofit all about women and gender diversity in voice technology. I'm also proud to say that I'm the head of conversational research and strategy at Versa, which is the largest voice agency in the world, headquartered in Australia, though I am based in Seattle. So let's get into it. Today, the outline of today's talk is talking about the future, which includes voice AI, innovation, and ubiquity of voice AI, multilingual and multimodal interactions, and also integrated builds for all. And this is a lot of jargon. I will unpack a lot of this, but my idea today is really to showcase a lot of the ecosystem and hopefully inspire you to think about voice AI in new and different ways. So I always like to set the level straight of what are we talking about? What is voice AI, right? When we think about voice, we're speaking to each other, right? But voice artificial intelligence is really thinking about a world where computers are understanding voice and inputs and outputs can use voice, automatic speech recognition and text-to-speech. And this has most sophisticatedly been seen in Google AI's Google Duplex. If you've seen this video, I'm not going to play it for you. But what happens is the Google Assistant calls different places. For example, here is a haircut appointment. The user says, I'd like to make a haircut appointment, and the Google Assistant will call the hair salon and make an appointment with a human. So, I mean, beating potentially the Turing test of the person thinks that they're speaking to a real human who books the hair appointment successfully and then sends a message receipt back to the person who wanted the haircut. And so this idea that there's voice technology that can simulate a human and a human's voice in these conversational multi-turn interactions, right? Back and forth and back and forth. And that it conveys the meaning and completes the task. Now, a lot of proponents have said, the demos they showed at Google, how many of those were made, right? How sophisticated is this technology? Is this a really narrow use case? How does this extrapolate? A lot of those questions we don't necessarily know the answers to, but what a cool use of voice AI in thinking about regular practical interactions that we have and how that potentially can be disrupted. Is there a world where instead of a human answering the phone at the hair salon, it's another robot and they can just converse together? So I think this is one example of voice AI, but clearly we're going to see many, many more today. When we think about voice technology, you've probably heard about voice, maybe similar to ideas about blockchain or VR. There's these new emerging technologies, and the ubiquity of voice is growing in leaps and bounds. Perhaps you saw, well, let's talk these through. So search by voice, Google reports that around 20% of their searches today are made by voice query today. So that's in a desktop, that's on a phone, 20% potentially. This year, 2020, Google Assistant will replace voice search in Chrome, which it has for my version of Chrome, where you are searching by asking the Google Assistant, and that takes you to your different results. Similarly, in thinking about ubiquity and how voice is omnipresent these days, Alexa devices, there are hundreds of millions of IoT purchases. They announced this at CES 2020, which translates into hundreds of millions of weekly interactions with smart devices also. And it's interesting they use interactions, right? Because this is when we're thinking about you interacting with your speaking system. Here are different IoT, but that you might have a smart speaker where you speak to it, and instead of it being a voice output, hearing something, that it would change the lights, or it would change the thermostat, or whatnot. So I think those interactions with smart devices. But thinking about ubiquity, hundreds of millions of these products are out there, and how we can search with our voice today through our regular IoT. So I think really thinking about what that means in the broader picture is hard to conceptualize potentially. But this is voice AI. When we think about the broader scope of products and what the future will look like, I think about multimodal. So what is multimodal? Multimodal means leveraging multiple modes or modalities. We're thinking text, audio, video, AR, VR, gesture, voice, thinking about all types of inputs and outputs. And obviously this isn't exhaustive, but here's some examples. So here I showed previously the Alexa IoT, here's some Google IoT, thinking about what's on your phone, what's on different IoT, what's on hardware, what is a smart home, your thermostat. On the top right here, we see integrated potential gesture. So computer vision being used to integrate it with different visuals that we see. This potentially for a healthcare setting. And another example I really think underrated is augmented reality, and really using IoT or using different multimodal devices to augment that which you see in a computer vision and visual medium that can be completely interpreted in different new ways. I think multimodal is our future, and thinking about integrated builds is the topic of this talk in part. But I think really thinking right now, a lot of us design for, this is for augmented reality, this is for voice. And I think really thinking about how all these things coexist and are leveraged for the strongest tools is really important for the future of the ecosystem. So let's look at a few more examples. Thinking about voice tech all around the world and multimodal experiences. On the top left, we have some examples from Alibaba and Baidu, and different examples of how one might see the news or different media, which is somewhat similar and different to what we have here in the United States. On the top right, we have an example from Kuwait, a really cool blogger who has looked at Alexa devices and reviews different IoT, has used Alexa devices for her prayer practices, which is, of course, another way to use Alexa devices. On the bottom left, my team at Versa has worked on Google Assistant Domino's pizza ordering so that you can order pizza. And my CEO at Versa has done demos of this at conferences, and the pizza has come so quickly that people think it was set up. but it's just that the tech works so well of ordering a pizza through the Google Assistant. Another example, which is another more integrated build, is an example, I believe, from China, where the IoT turns and the computer vision is mobile to follow you around the room so that the interaction and the video stream and the audio can be maintained in the quality while the user is moving around a space. So I think when we think about integrated builds and what's going on around the world in this multimodal environment, there's so many people using these in different, fun, innovative ways. I think also I recently came upon an acquaintance of mine, Lawrence, was looking at the Xiaomi ecosystem where they have 40 different types of IoT products, really thinking about kids' bedroom stuff, office ones, living room products, and really the innovation being pushed forward with use cases, how it fits. You know, if I'm asking my printer to print something, goodness knows, printers often have issues, but really thinking about the quality of these experiences and how sophisticated these different interactions might need to be, and the architectures behind them are really, really important. So I think one of the things I'm really cognizant of is when we think about multimodal and the future of voice, that we need to think internationally about how products are developing around the world and how this matches the ecosystem that we currently exist in our own regions and demographics. Another example of integrated builds and multimodal is an example from Abhishek Singh, who has used computer vision, voice, and screen, excuse me, that cut off, to think about when people are using American Sign Language, right? They're using their body and they're using their hand language. That is interpreted by the computer vision. So the camera interprets signs, then it's converted to text and fed into an Alexa system. And the Alexa then responds back in a textual form so that people who potentially cannot hear as well can use American Sign Language and converse in that way. And I think this is a really interesting intersection of multimodal, different languages, and different forms of different languages. So you can see how multimodal is really thinking through, again, different inputs and outputs for a customized user experience. And as I mentioned with American Sign Language, I am a multilingual, and I think it's really important. Maybe this is one of the easiest jargon words I use in this talk. What is multilingual? Well, multilingual is the fact that around 7,000 languages are spoken internationally. This is a map of human language families, not the languages themselves nor individuals, but really thinking about the groups of languages and how those languages are similar or different in many, many ways. But 7,000, think of how many languages are supported on your IoT today and how the quality of them might be different depending on which ones are used most often or the builders are building. We have seen comical interactions of this. Perhaps you've seen the viral BBC sketch where Scottish people are trying to use the voice recognition elevator, which understands them not at all, and it escalates very, very quickly. But I think when we're thinking about language, we also need to be thinking about different dialects. I'm going to dive into this. I think this is a humorous example of something that's honestly quite frightening if you were stuck in an elevator. One of my, someone in the field of linguistics who is just a phenomenal powerhouse has a rule about this, the Bender rule. If you're a computational linguist, you probably have heard about this. The Bender rule is thinking about, well, let me start with Dr. Emily Bender is a professor in the Department of Linguistics at the University of Washington, and she's the director of the Computational Linguistics program. She's a powerhouse, and she has the Bender rule where we always name the language or languages you're working on, and the English is neither synonymous nor, it's cutting it off, representative of natural language. And so really when we are using computing and thinking about linguistics, English is not synonymous with all languages, right? If we have an N of 1 and we're extrapolating from that, clearly that's not going to extrapolate well to too many things. But really naming the languages one is working on and the data set, quality data sets and inclusion in that way is really, really important. important. And here, let me give just a few examples of more about the variation of language that might play into a lot of your different builds. Bender rule, it's awesome. All right. Natural language is what we call in linguistics and in computing is human language. So naturally how humans communicate. There are various scripts, there are various symbols. Sometimes we're reading left to right or right to left, up versus down and otherwise. Here are some examples of scripts in Arabic, Tamil, Hebrew, and Korean, and really thinking about the Romanized languages you see in English here and how they differ, and how when computers are thinking about how to interpret these symbols or the characters that are supported on different IoT, it can be radically different, and making sure that these devices work for people with different language backgrounds is hugely important. So that's some of the graphical interpretations. Let's also think about when we speak. And a really great example of this is tonal languages. So in Cantonese, there are 6 tones, and these have meaningful differences. Where the pitch starts from and how it moves across the word is really important and meaningful in completely different words. In this example, we see poetry, history, try, time, market, and be as being the same base, but having a different pitch and tone going to it. I don't speak Cantonese, but I hope that this is a good graphical example of what's going on in the language, so that speech recognition needs to be thoughtful about what it picks up and how it's reading different pieces of words phonetically, and really thinking about when you're preparing your speech recognition, is it ready for Cantonese? Is it thinking about where the pitch is starting? And how that relates to different speakers who are different heights, different vocal tract lengths. I could talk to you about linguistics for days. Let's continue though, to think about Hinglish and examples of code switching. So Hinglish is on the rise in India, and India is the 7th largest economy around the world. This is an example from a BBC clip where students in the classroom are being taught Hinglish, where a phrase or sentence might start in Hindi and then be in English and then return back to Hindi. And it's this example of code switching that you might have in a segment, 2 different languages, but that users or the computer understand it fully as a whole. And I think this is really important when we're thinking about language as an entity, right? Thinking about it all being cohesive, but if we're switching out in different pieces and parts, the computer needs to be ready and prepared for these changes and where they hit in different noun, verb, phrases, whatnot. So really cool example, and really, I mean, so many people speak English. I think just thinking about the way we think about computing and language in general is really important for this. So this talk specifically, other than being about voice AI and being about multilingual environments, is also thinking about integrated futures for all. And when I'm talking about integrated, it's definitely the multimodal part, but it's really the integrated and omni-channel. A lot of these vocabulary words are used. And omni-channel is thinking about that data are used to align the company's message, goals, objectives, design across each channel and device within the scope, and providing a consistent and aligned customer experience. So that if you are, in this example, looking at a top, I believe, if you're shopping, that it retains the information across different channels. So if you're speaking to it, if you're using your mobile device, if you transition to a desktop, all of this is a consistent user experience, that you don't have to re-enter information again and again, but that it knows you and it becomes personalized in many ways. While most companies are not quite integrated yet, I think it's really important for the future of branding and understanding users and sophisticated data-driven ways. For example, I today was trying out CVS and looking at how their experience on mobile, on the left this is a mobile screenshot, and then on their desktop are really different when you're just starting from the screens. And does it support the same products? Does it have the same capabilities, scanning features, finding stores? This is just one example, but really thinking about branding across them? Is the tone of it the same? Are the capabilities the same? Thinking about the overall integrated story of what they know about me as a user, or how personalized some of these products are. And just really thinking about the build and user experience, customer engagement and retention are all implied in these things. Okay, so we know that people are using CVS. That's not a surprise, but I think I'm going to go back a little bit to voice AI and how meaningful that is for our future. Specifically, I really love this quote. There's no future that doesn't have ambient computing or voice interaction activation. None. This is a quote from Mark Cuban, the investor and futurist. He was speaking at an Alexa education event. But I think really thinking about, although we don't exactly know how the future will evolve, we know that voice activation and ambient computing are part of that. But when we think about using voice AI and how it extrapolates well or doesn't to different populations, integrated builds for all, I really think about who it's currently not working for and how we can make it better. Specifically, in my Harvard Business Review article from 2019, it's called Voice Recognition Still Has Significant Race and Gender Biases. And this looks at some research from Dr. Tapman that has been further seen in a recent study, the New York Times, Stanford, reporting white and Black speakers having a 16% differences in their voices. I'll give some more examples, but really, I'm very proud of this paper. It was placed on their homepage and also translated into Brazilian Portuguese. And I think really, hopefully, showcased a lot of the work that's already been done in this field, but really thinking about how voice recognition, while being more and more ubiquitous, still has significant race and gender biases. And significant, some people say, oh, it has a little bit of difference. What's the really big problem here? Well, the problem is pretty huge. And it's not just about your moral compass, but it's also a lot about finances and what products will be adopted. So when we think about, here's some examples. This is the 50% line, this blue line that cuts through, and that potentially with Google's API used in YouTube, 13% more accurate for men than for women, and potentially 10% lower for mixed race speakers. And this, maybe you're not used to seeing these type of plots or reading these type of papers. So I've kind of narrowed it down to an example. If we are speaking into the same system and we're all native English speakers, Josh, my friend Josh, who's a white male, might get an A- of how well the speech recognition system understands him. And if I were to read the same exact paragraph as a white female, I might get a C+. Okay. And then if we have another speaker named Jada, who's a mixed race female, she might get a D+ for reading the same content to the same system. So we're seeing a huge breakdown really quickly of different speakers, and teams across the world, all different countries, are trying to do this, trying to fix these problems. And I think the really important thing is that I don't believe this was intentional. In fact, people want their systems to work as best as possible. I know speech scientists who are really excited to work on these problems and make these significantly better. But the problem is it's still very pervasive today. And when we think about the money aspect, the example I give, which I think hopefully is quite compelling, is a colleague of mine who speaks both Spanish and English, and has quite a bit of capital to spend on these things. He and his wife were considering buying a smart fridge. I don't know if you've seen these really cool smart fridges. They're multimodal. You can speak to them. You can understand what's expiring soon in your fridge. They were considering purchasing one, but then also realizing it wouldn't understand them. And that even though they were willing to spend quite a bit of money on these type of products, it wasn't going to understand them. And why would they purchase it? And I think there's this huge gap when you think of all the different people who might be interested in buying these or participating in this IoT, but feel distanced or pushed out of this ecosystem, which is a huge amount of money. The growth indexes in, California and Florida and Texas is just crazy. And I think thinking about that just from a fiscal place is very compelling, hopefully. Melinda Gates talks about these huge missed financial opportunities as blind spots related to diversity. Here's a quote from her. "We care about diversity, but we really care about how much money we make. Women are 85% of consumer dollars spent. Women control 70% of financial decisions in the house. So if you're missing an opportunity because you don't see it, you're leaving money on the table. You're not in the deal flow." And I think this is really, really important when we're thinking about who is purchasing, who's got the purchasing power, and also who's building it, and how these match up to be at the table to say, excuse me, I would like to make sure this works for these people who might be interested in buying it, and huge amounts of money. So I'm going to give a few more examples of different populations and innovative ways people are thinking about who to be building for. Potentially, if you're in the voice ecosystem, you've seen recently Soapbox Labs, based in Ireland, raise their Series A of 6.5 million. Dr. Patricia Scanlon is thinking about voice tech for kids. And she said, "I knew voice tech was getting big, but no one was looking at kids stuff." She's a speech scientist and has really worked on the plumbing for automatic speech recognition, specifically for kids around 3 to 7 years old. And so breaking down those different phonemes, the parts of words specifically for those users. Soapbox Labs, really cool. Another example is Google AI has partnered with the Canadian Down Syndrome for Project Understood, and really getting more data from people with Down syndrome so that they can make technology better and understand those people better as well, because you need that data to be able to make systems for those. Their demographic is, of course, very important. All these are is boomers, baby boomers, and people over the age of 50. So Marvi is a studio. The CEO is Heidi Culberson, who really thinks about voice technology and technology in general for older populations, which there's a large number of people and we want to support them well. And the use cases and how tech would work for them is significantly different from other people. Another example is Vocal ID, thinking about synthesizing human voices for different people as they're losing their voices and voice banking them. I think it's a fantastic approach from Dr. Rupal Patel out in Boston. Mozilla is working on a project called Common Voice, where they're getting lots of different speech samples to be open source, that data can be freely and publicly available, teaching machines how humans actually speak instead of people trying to speak more like the machines to be understood or some kind of glitchy version thereof. This is a really cool project. I've donated my voice. I recommend you look into it. It's called Common Voice by Mozilla. A few other examples include Novel Effect. Co-founders Melissa and Matt Hammersley work on soundscapes for reading, so that when you're reading the book, you can hear the lion growl, or as you're reading along, the soundscape changes to build the environment in an auditory way around the system. Really cool work. Check them out, Novel Effect. The last few things, my team at Versa, check them out at versa.agency. We've worked with Huggies, with Domino's, with Beyond Blue, with maternal health care, and with Coca-Cola to make different builds that integrate voice AI and really think about the consumer experience for mental health, for consumer products, and for experiences and engagement and branding. So come check us out at Versa. I'm the head of conversational research. Of course, I have to mention as well my team at Women in Voice. Here's some examples of us all around the world. Hackathons in Mexico, my ambassadors in Japan, some amazing events in Madrid with our chapter there. Women in Voice is an international nonprofit, again, about women and gender minorities in voice technology. Here's our website. We just revamped. Please come check it out, womeninvoice.org. And one of our slogans, join the party. We are so excited to have so many people come, women, non-gender binary, and as well as people who identify as allies, and really thinking about everyone coming together and being excited about diverse teams. So our mission, of course, is about building community, amplifying work and talent of women, providing professional development and support, and empowering and celebrating women in this ecosystem. So today's talk was featured the future, thinking about voice AI, innovation, ubiquity, multilingual and multimodal, and integrated builds for all, and what the future does look like. I hope you've enjoyed, and I look forward to being in touch. Definitely check me out on LinkedIn and Twitter. Hope to speak with you soon.